conflict in Vietnam and bring an end to it by negotiation. At the direction that the war is taking. I was the first one to call for the negotiations. I was the first one to point out that we couldn't win this just through American effort, and that it required the effort and the will and the determination of the South Vietnamese themselves. And I'd like to have this conflict ended, and I'd like to bring not only American soldiers home, because I think that we should remember that even while these discussions and negotiations go on in Paris, that there have been more Americans killed in the last 2 weeks of the war than any other period of time, any time in the war. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to also to not only return the Americans to this country, but I'd like to take the $85 million that we're spending every day in Vietnam, the $600 million that we spend every week in Vietnam, and bring it back to the United States and start to use it on behalf of our own people. Inflation. Support that legislation. I would like to see him support that legislation because it's going to have such an effect on our communities across this nation over the period of the next few months. I've also introduced legislation which would give tax credits and tax benefits to the private sector, to get them involved in areas where there's unemployment or where people are on welfare. Give them tax credits and tax benefits to take people who are presently unemployed, who are presently on welfare, and make them taxpayers instead of recipients of taxpayers' money. Raise some questions about it. Ronald Reagan hasn't supported it yet. And he's been a fine governor. I congratulate you on what a fine governor. What he's done for those who were the mental institutions is really good. And then the fact that it hasn't cost any money, that's what's so impressive. Then you could always have Richard Nixon, which you know what, that's the sign where Nixon's the one. But what is the rest? Going up and up and up. It was 3.5% last year. It was at a rate of 5% in March of this year. And the cost of goods has gone steadily up since March. For those on fixed salaries, for those on wages, for our elderly people who are retired, for those on Social Security, this can be devastating. A person working in a factory might think that he's making more now than he did in 1965. The fact is that because of inflation, the average factory worker here in the United States is making less now than he did in 1965. And if you buy a home over a 30-year period, if you buy a $20,000 home over a 30-year period, it costs $10,000 more now than it would have 3 years ago because of the high interest. And I strongly about what the compassion and the understanding and the feeling of the American people is, and because I think that we can do better around the rest of the world, that we can be better. She put a plug in for me. She put a plug in for me. She said something nice. I don't have to feel that all knowledge and all wisdom rests in Washington, or rests with a few people in Washington. I think it's back here in our local communities and communities all across the United States. home and then you forget all about it. How will I know? I'll be watching you next Tuesday. Listen, I need your help. But more than that, it's what we can do together. It's what we can do together. People made, in times of crisis in the past, American people made contributions to one another. And they made contributions to other people around the world. That's the spirit of the United States. We are the last. Thomas Jefferson said we are the last best hope of mankind. And that's what the American people are. And that's something special that we have here in this country. That's the spirit I want to draw. That's the spirit that belongs in the United States of America. And that's the spirit that we'll make together if we can win on June 4th and Tuesday. The people who were formerly for Senator McCarthy coming to our reception. I think it's very nice of you, and you can just go home after this reception and burn your signs, and nobody will know. And nobody will. You're going to be treated as equals like everybody else, and we think that the fact that you came here tonight, that you were willing to admit that you were wrong by holding up IUC.